Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us on the first of our two-part series of our pre-calving webinars. My name is Aisling Molloy, and I work alongside Martina Harrington and James Milan on the FutureBeef programme, which is Teagasc's flagship suckler demonstration farm programme. As part of this, we've 23 commercial suckler beef farms, which are spread right throughout the country, and the aim of our programme is to demonstrate how you can make your farm more profitable through efficiency by also reducing your impact on the environment. The programme is sponsored by 10 meat processors, and I'd like to thank them sincerely for their continued support. The calving and breeding seasons are critical to ensure profitability for suckler farmers. So that's getting that live calf onto the ground and then obviously getting its mother back in calf for the following year. Tonight, we're going to hear from Ed Curtin, who's one of our future beef farmers from North Cork, to talk us through how he manages his cows before they calve. Professor David Kenny from Teagasc is joining us to chat about body condition scoring of cows and feeding minerals to reduce issues at calving time, and he's completed extensive studies in cow reproduction here in Ireland. Last but not least, Emma Sargent from MSD also joins us to chat about pre-calving hygiene and vaccines, including the brand new Cryptosporidium scour vaccine that's available this year. So as we go along, if you have any questions, you can add them to the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and Martina's in the background, so she'll be taking them and we'll come to them after the presentation. So I'm just going to share my screen here now and we will get into it. So again, I'd just like to acknowledge the sponsors of the programme that are pictured at the bottom of the screen there now. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge William Kingston, who's one of our programme farmers who unfortunately passed away last week. I had the pleasure of working with William for the last 3 years, and he was a huge advocate for the programme. He kept up to date with everything that was going on, and he really enjoyed being a part of it. He's pictured here with his local advisor, Anna Sexton, and the Southwest Beef Specialist, Niall Kearns. And on behalf of Teagasc and the Future Beef programme, we'd like to pass on our sincere condolences to his wife, Diana, and their children, Mark, Aisling and Chloe, and all his relatives, friends and community in Drimoleague. Ar yesterday, Grau Anam. We're going to share a video of Ed Curtin, as I said, who's our future beef farmer who's featured tonight, just to give an idea of what's involved with his system and the type of cattle that he has on his farm.
Hi, I'm Edmund Curtin. We're farming here up in Meelan, up near Newmarket in North County Cork. We're operating a suckler to weaning system and a dairy calf to beef system here as well. Farm size is 32 hectares owned here at home, and we're into a further 13 hectares in outblocks as well. The farm here at home is involved in a cooperation between the hen harrier special protection area as well. 60% of the home farm here is under that scheme. We're under an autumn calving suckler system here, start the first week of August and finish up about the end of October. Currently nearly finished breeding here now at the moment. Scanned there recently, right, the first bunch of cows had 90% conception to that. Inseminate predominantly to limousine, both conventional and sexed. I've gone away from using an awful lot of Belgian blue down to a limited number of it, and I use red Angus sires and heifers as well. Any replacements I may bring in.
So just as a recap for tonight, we're going to go through the topics in the following order, and really they're the 3 legs of the stool to get ready for calving on suckler farms. So we're going to start off with the body condition scoring, and this is a system to assess how fat or thin an animal is, and the target is to be 2.75 to 3 at calving, and the biggest thing really is that you need to handle the animals. So we have an example of a heifer here on the left-hand side, and I'm just going to use that to show where exactly you handle, and on the right-hand side, where you can see that when she's going through the crush with a body condition score of 3. So the first place you want to handle is the tail head, and to see how much or how little fat is there. Secondly, you want to do the ribs, and thirdly, the short ribs, so just above that again. So David, from your experience, if an animal is too fat or too thin at calving, what implications does this have?
Hi, Aisling, and good evening to your listeners. I think body condition scoring is probably, from a farmer's perspective, one of the key management tools that they can use, to I suppose, have a major influence, not alone on the calving process, but the subsequent fertility of the herd. And we know, would say, and my colleague Michael Diskin over many, many years looked at a lot of work in this, or conducted a lot of work in this area, and showed very clearly that body condition score calving has probably the biggest influence on subsequent reproduction, you know, the fertility of the herd after that. So I suppose the two things are, number one, you don't want the cow too overly fat with, say, calving, because obviously that can have implications for dystocia. But equally, cows that are, you know, particularly thin at calving can take up to a month longer, certainly 3 weeks longer, I would say, to come back, you know, to normal heat cycles again after calving. And it's probably one of the key things that influences the length of time it takes that cow to come back, resume normal cyclicity, resume normal heat cycles after calving. And that in itself, that length of time between when the suckler cow calves and when she shows her first heat, is probably the biggest, I suppose, factor, or the that influences whether that cow can, you know, come back and calf again, we'll say 12 months later, or achieve, I suppose, a 365-day calving interval.
Brilliant. And if we have farmers on the call this evening that are looking at some of their cows and maybe they're 3 to 6 weeks out from calving and they might be too thin at present, what can they do to help manage them from here on in?
Yeah, I suppose, to be honest, Aisling, you know, if you take it, and you outlined it very clearly there, we'll say the condition scoring, we'll say, and the kind of the variation that's there. And normally, with most cows, you'd see them somewhere between maybe condition score 2, we'll say, and about maybe 3, 3.5, you know, and that would be, you know, where you'd see them for most of the season. And I suppose really it starts probably at the time of weaning, you know, that you don't want cows too thin at weaning. And if you have heifers, you know, where the first calf, you know, it might be sensible, would say, you know, and you see them getting particularly thin, to try to maybe wean those a little bit earlier and pin them, you know, as a group to give them preferential treatment. Equally, we'll say maybe older cows in the herd that have gone below maybe a calf or a condition score of about 2. It takes, you know, when you look at I suppose, a condition score, you're talking about the equivalent of about 70 kilograms of light weight. You know, so you can imagine, would say, that it takes a considerable amount of time, would say, you know, in a cow, even if she's growing at 0.5 kilogram a day, we'll say, to accumulate, we'll say, that extra fat. So I suppose cows that are out maybe, you know, quite close to calving now at this stage, it would be difficult to, I suppose, change condition score to any great extent. But certainly if they're, you know, if they're too thin, you know, they need to be getting good quality silage as a minimum, you know, and you know, equally would say from I suppose, a calving perspective, you don't want those cows who are in good condition already, would say, you know, to be overly fat at calving. In fact, they can often, you know, afford to lose a bit of condition, you know, so that those saving, I suppose, on silage.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thanks very much. And Ed, from your point of view, you're in an autumn calving system, so I suppose you don't have the same luxury in terms of feeding ration and giving out silage and that when they're out at grass. So how do you manage to keep your cows in good body condition scoring before calving?
So look, it starts really actually when I go to dry off the cows in around April. So if we dry everything and the calves stay inside until they're fully weaned and they're left out to grass, we try to get them out a bit now if weather prevailed all right there now from early April on, all right. So the cows dried inside, and we generally like to dry the cows off in fairly good condition, because what happens is they go to an old farm down the road that's in the hen harrier. You have a good bit of rushes and rough terrain there, like, so they get to run near that place, and it's broken into paddocks, like, so they get to wheel around the paddocks for the summer. So ideally they'd be going out with a bit of condition on them, all right, as opposed to maybe some people adversely would do it the opposite way. They'd let their cows out with and hope to get a kind of a compensatory kind of a drive after it, but they generally, the cows would hold their own when they go down there, just about, and as they would shove on close to the calving, maybe a month before it, like, condition would start to peel off them to a degree. Now they'd be fit, but they'd be kind of slightly over conditioned when they'd be left out. But generally they'd be fine and fit by the time they got to calved in, and they're put out after grass dinner after second cut silage when they do calve.
Brilliant. And I think you hit the nail on the head there in terms of, you know, it's to be fit, not fat at calving, and you know, that's the big thing as well. Super.
Yeah.
So
we've learned the hard way over the years there, especially Belgian blues, like, you need a fit cow to go calving, really.
Absolutely, absolutely. Super. So that's part 1 of our 3 legs on the stool. Moving on then to the pre-calving minerals side of things. You can see a table here on the left-hand side. So this is what, for a suckler cow, this is what you want to see on a pre-calving mineral when you look at the label. So we have it broken down into the macro minerals, which to my mind are the bigger type minerals. the micro minerals, and then into the vitamins as well. And we'll talk a bit about adjusted minerals tonight, and you know, we regularly promote that. And I suppose just to explain the reason behind that. So if you look at these macro minerals here, this is your magnesium, calcium, phosphorus, and sodium. And this percentage, it also equates to grams. So by totting all them up in total, you're going to need about 40 grams for your suckler cow per day, is what they need to be getting. So if we're looking here, this is 40 grams of a pre-calving mineral just in a pint glass for context. And when we compare that to a bolus, which a lot of farmers use pre-calving, physically, you're never going to get that 40 grams per day into a bolus. So it's just to emphasize from that point of view. Now, the boluses obviously do have a role to play. And in terms of the micro minerals, these are only in milligrams per kilo is all they're needed. So they can supply the micro minerals absolutely no problem at all. And some of these we're looking at are copper, cobalt, iodine, manganese, selenium, and zinc. And a lot of boluses as well, they don't tend to have the vitamins in it either. So vitamin A, D3, and E are key for pre-calving. So just to have a quick look at a mineral spec or a label for a mineral, a bagged mineral, and just where you'd actually find some of these figures on it. So in terms of magnesium, there's 24% in this particular one, and we're aiming to have 17 to 20% is what we want. So obviously that's ticking the box from that side of things. The calcium, we're looking for less than 2%. So in this case, there's actually 0 added, and we'll come back to David on that in a minute to explain that. In terms of the micro minerals then, so there's a lot of different forms of cobalt here in this particular mineral, but when we tot all of them up, it comes up to 3,000 milligrams, which again is in our 2,000 to 4,000 range of what we're looking for. And then just to pick out one of the vitamins there as well, vitamin A is 400,000 international units. We want to have over 600,000. So not quite beating the spec there, but look, it's a matter of actually going through it and maybe discussing with your co-op or wherever you're buying your minerals to see if it has what you're looking for. But David, you might just comment on the calcium if you don't mind. So we know after calving, calcium is obviously very important in terms of milk production. Why are we looking for less than 2% pre-calving?
Yeah, it's a good point, Aisling, and certainly a major issue, would say, more so maybe with dairy cows than beef cows. But you know, some of the first cross would say, you know, beef dairy animals with, you know, a significant milk yield potential could well, would say, you know, be at risk of hypocalcemia. In other words, we say low blood calcium at calving. And what we want to do is, I suppose, almost trick the animal, would say, into making sure that, you know, that the body, you know, that where most of the calcium is stored, would say, the bones essentially, would say, can release calcium very quickly and efficiently, you know, at the onset of lactation or when the cow starts calving. And you know, one of the ways of doing that is to reduce, I suppose, calcium mobilization or usage, would say, you know, in the I suppose the weeks, would say, and the months, you know, prior to, particularly in the last probably 3-4 weeks before the cow calves. So as you say, you want to make sure that the calcium content of the diet, there's no supplementary calcium in the forages. So normally the balance would be about 2 to 1, would say, calcium to phosphorus, would say, in forages, would say, that we're typically fed in Ireland. And we certainly don't want to increase that, you know, in the pre-calving cow. So essentially, as you say, it's keep it low prior to calving so that the cow can mobilize, you know, a large amounts of calcium from the bones, you know, once lactation, once milk starts directly after calving.
Perfect. Thanks very much for covering that. So just a few tips then on the pre-calved minerals. The biggest one is really to check that mineral specification and making sure that you're feeding what the cow actually needs. And as I said already, a bolus will not supply your macro minerals. These have to be fed daily to get them into the cow before calving. Another big thing is to feed as recommended. So most minerals are somewhere in the range of 100 to 120 grams per head per day for about at least 6 weeks pre-calving. So it's just to follow them instructions on the mineral you're feeding. And if you're adjusting on the silage, all cows have to be able to feed at the same time. In some cases, if there's restricted headspace, you might have to split the portion into 2 different feeds. And roughly, for a rough rule of thumb, at 120 grams per head per day, a 25 kilo mineral bag should last 1 week for 30 cows. So if you're going through less than that, you're not feeding enough. And if you're going through more, you're probably overfeeding. So just to keep an eye on that. A lot of debate we hear about choosing a mineral as well would be around the cost of it. So if we just have a look, you know, people tend to choose the cheaper bags, but if we look at a mineral that is €38 for a 25 kilo bag, it works out at €7.66 per cow over a 6-week period. If you compare that to a €30 bag, you're looking at €6.05 per cow over 6 weeks. So really the difference in that €8 per bag is only worth about 161 per cow, which is really nothing in the grand scheme of things. But the biggest thing, and you know, that €30 bag could have a better mineral spec than the 38. So the biggest thing is just to keep an eye on them. Just when we're chatting about the boluses as well, so to give 2 boluses, it's roughly about €11 per head, but bearing in mind that there's no macro minerals provided there, so it's not that you're saving any money with it, and obviously there's labour associated with both. Ed, from your side of things, again, your cows are out at grass. Like, are pre-calving minerals important to you at that time of the year? And how do you get them into your cows when you don't have the luxury of feeding it on silage?
Look, yeah, we'd introduce buckets, the bucket licks from just 8 weeks out. We'd make sure they're out for long enough. Like that. Look, I would prefer to feed you powder minerals to be sure that they're getting awful lot more than allowing voluntary uptake of a bucket. You're limited enough to what you can get in magnesium and that. Look, we've gotten away fine. I'd top up with water in the water, all right. Closer to calving with minerals through the water as well with the tablets. Again, what I kind of find is that in warm weather, the top of the buckets, no matter how much you wet them, they kind of dry out. Cows don't take them in as much. Even in a wet year, the last couple of years, they're inclined to dry out just with the sunshine. That. So just again, a kind of a fail safe just to get enough minerals in there. But so look, it's the mag and the vitamin D is the most important part of the whole thing for them to get in there. So I've gotten away in the last number of years anyway, look, without any slow calvings, any sign of milk fevers after calving. That, so I'm happy enough that it's doing its job, but still will be conscious now that with the leaks, like that you're not getting enough and getting in, and well, that you're not guaranteed you're not getting in enough magnesium with them, you know.
True, and of course from the licks point of view, there's a lot of molasses in that as well, so you're paying for that on top of it. But look, at least you're making an effort when they're out of grass, as you say. It's not easy when they're there from that point of view either. So from that side of it. So if we move on then to the third leg of our stool, we're looking at our hygiene and our vaccinations. And I suppose the biggest thing is, why would you give pre-calving vaccinations in the first place? So this is a summary of all the calves that were postmortems were carried out on in the Department of Agriculture labs back in 2023. And it just shows in terms of neonatal calves, the amount that died from these GIT system infections was 26%. So the GIT is gastrointestinal tract system infections, which is basically your scours. So you're looking at your rotavirus, your salmonellas, your E. coli's, all that side of it would have been killing them at that stage. And then if we just have another look at the 1 to 6 month old calves, and we can see here about just under 39% of calves in that age bracket died from respiratory system infections. So that's back to your kind of pneumonias, your RSV, PI3s, and your IBR. And this is followed very closely again by your GIT system infections, so back to your scours again. So I suppose these could be prevented by vaccinating the cows beforehand. So we're going to continue on, and Emma from MSD is on with us, and she's just going to talk us through some of the vaccines that are available for cows to prevent scours and the IBR as well.
Yeah, thanks very much, Aisling. So yeah, Emma Sargent is my name, and I'm a ruminant technical vet with MSD. So we'll chat through pre-calving vaccination. So if you're happy to click on, Aisling, we'll get started. So I suppose kind of before we get into talking about individual vaccines, we'll chat a little bit about vaccination in the dry period and kind of why we do it. Basically, it's an optimal time for these certain vaccines to be going in. With the calf scour vaccines, these work by passing protection from the cow to the calf through the first feed of beastons and then through the milk over the next few days. And so basically that cow is going to start making that colostrum, that beastons, several weeks out from calving. And by vaccinating her at the time she's making that colostrum, we're basically boosting or maximizing the protective antibodies in her system that she can pass on to the calf as well. Another reason, I suppose, is that we are entering a period of high stress for the cow, so it's stressful on her system to calve. And what tends to happen is if she's harbouring disease or she's a carrier of certain infections, she can be more likely to shed these at the time of calving. And vaccinating her prior to into this stressful period can just help to minimize the amount that she sheds or those bugs that she passes out into the environment, and minimize the chance that the calf in that environment can get that disease passed on as well. I suppose one other thing is that often people have a little bit more time kind of in the dry period to get jobs like these done. And so it is worthwhile at this time of year to just prepare in advance. So know kind of what vaccines you want to give and when you need to give them. You know, be able to have your setup ready to go and have extra help on hand. And just having a plan in advance means you can plan around things like adverse weather, and you have a bit of time to play with as well. So yeah, that's kind of why we're doing it. And then again, just before getting into the individual vaccines themselves, just kind of covering the basics. They are basics, but they can be overlooked, and they do make a difference to how effective your vaccination program is. So we really want to make sure they're being stored, mixed, and administered correctly. So just reading the bottle or the box is a great way to do so. You want to make sure most of them need to be stored in the fridge, kind of between 2 and 8 degrees. So just checking the temperature in your vaccine fridge is a good exercise to make sure that vaccine is going to be effective when you're given it. Some vaccines need to be mixed together before they're given. And then in terms of the dose you're given of a vaccine and where you're putting it into the animal, is it going under the skin or into the muscle? They're all variable from vaccine to vaccine, and they can affect how well the vaccine will work. So just kind of taking 2 minutes to read the bottle before you're given things can help. Using clean needles and syringes are great as well. You don't want to be transferring any kind of infection or bacteria by a dirty needle. And so putting it on an automated gun, as we have in the picture there, or just using a sterile needle and syringe each time is the way to go. One other thing then is just leaving at least 2 weeks between vaccines if they are not licensed to be given together. So the little leaflet inside the package will tell you if they're good to go to be used together or not. And if not, best practice is to leave 2 weeks between the vaccines, just to make sure that the cow has a chance for her immune system to respond appropriately to each vaccine. And then, yeah, we have a big star here, safety first. Injuries are not fun at this time of year, coming into a busy period. So just making sure, yeah, your facilities are up to scratch. You're taking care with the cows and with yourselves, putting hands between bars and things like that. And yeah, just kind of making sure that's all above board. And just have at the end there, your vet is the best person usually to talk to about the protocol. They kind of will know what diseases on your farm. They can do diagnostics for you, and they can recommend vaccines as well. So yeah, that's me. So yeah, we can get into individual vaccination then. So talking about our scour vaccines, pre-calving. So as I said, these work by vaccinating the cow. She passes on that immunity to the calf via the first feed of Easton's. So that first feed of Easton's is really important to get the immunity across from your vaccine. So we have our kind of tried and trusted calf scour vaccine here, Bovilis Rotavirus Corona, protects against rotavirus, coronavirus, and E. coli scours. So it is an oily vaccine with a 2 ml dose given under the skin or into the muscle. That has changed slightly. It used to be in the muscle only, but you can now give it under the skin if you like. It's a single dose, whether you're giving it for the first time or as a booster, and that dose needs to be given in the 12 to 3 week period pre-calving. Has a 28-day shelf life after first opening, as long as the bottle's not contaminated and it's stored in the fridge. So you can use it again a few weeks later to vaccinate a later calvers if you have those dates available. Good pack sizes, and yeah, that's the Rotavirus Corona. So we'll move on then to our Bovilis cryptium. So this is our new vaccine to protect calves against cryptosporidiosis scour. It's been 23 years in the making, and we're delighted to have it here now to help with cryptosporidiosis. Again, similar to the Rotavirus, it's this mineral oil vaccine, 2 ml dose that needs to go under the skin. So not in the muscle for this one, just under the skin. Another difference is that this is a 2-dose primary course. So the first time an animal receives this vaccine, they'll need to get 2 doses 4 to 5 weeks apart, and that they need to be in the 12 to 3 week pre-calving window as well. For subsequent calvings, a 1-dose booster is fine. So just 1 dose given in that 12 to 3 week pre-calving window once she's had the primary course the year before. Again, the 28-day shelf life after first opening and a couple of different pack sizes. And then just one thing to note, actually both for Rotovec and Cryptium, protection of these vaccines, as we said, gets transferred by that first feed of colostrum. But what we also need is ongoing feeding of transition milk, which is the milking before or after colostrum and before whole milk. That passes just local protection in the gut. And we need to feed that for at least 5 days for Cryptium. Good news is for sucklers, that's an easy job. Just by the calf suckling the cow and feeding off her, they will remain protected. Cool. And then just using these vaccines either alone or together, they can be given at the same time, not mixed, so just given at the same time in different injection sites. As we mentioned before, the Cryptium needs to give 2 doses when the animal is having it for the first time, 4 to 5 weeks apart in that 12 to 3 week calving pre-calving window. That Rotovec is 1 dose, and a kind of a practical way to do it is kind of if you have your dates available, go in with your Rotovec when you usually would, as close to kind of 3 weeks or a month out from calving as you can. Work back a month from that, and that's when your first dose of Cryptium goes in. So first dose of Cryptium, 4 to 5 weeks later, go in with your second dose of Cryptium and your Rotovec, and then just making sure that's at least 3 weeks before her calving date. Cool. And then the last vaccine I'll just talk about is Bovillus IBR marker live. So this works a little bit differently. You are vaccinating the cow, and this will prevent if she it helps to protect her against getting IBR, which is infectious bovine rhinotracheitis caused by a herpes virus. So rhinotracheitis, basically rhino nose, trachea windpipe, it affects the upper airway. Once an animal is infected with this virus, it will be infected for life. It remains a carrier and can shed at times of stress and be a source of infection to the herd. So the aim of the vaccination is to reduce clinical signs of if this happens, reduce shedding of these infected animals as they go through stressful periods, and then also therefore reducing the number of new infections in your herd. So we like to give this in the dry period or pre-calving to cows, basically just to reduce the chances of them shedding IBR into the environment and passing it on to the calf at a young age if they're going to be within the same airspace. So it's a 2 ml single dose. If you are giving it to your cow, you can go up the nose or into the muscle. If you're giving it to baby calves, it needs to go up the nose from 2 weeks to 3 months of age. And then once they're over 3 months, that's when you can go in the muscle or up the nose. From the intranasal route, it works within 4 days, and up in the muscle, it works within 14 days. And then you get 6 to 12 months duration of immunity, depending on your protocol. One thing then I would just say about this is if you don't know what the IBR status of your herd is, the first place to start is testing. So your vet can advise you on this and doing diagnostics and a vaccination protocol, or if you're thinking of vaccinating, your vet or your advisor is usually a good port of call to go from there. And it's usually a blood test that you'll be doing for your beef animals to ascertain your herd status or your infection status. And yeah, basically this is just a little slide with a lovely, nice, clean calving bed here, and just to kind of focus on the point that vaccinations are a great tool to help minimize disease around this time, but these diseases, calf scour, IBR, and calf pneumonia are multifactorial, just meaning that there are so many things that can contribute to disease. So you also need to be on top of your hygiene, on top of your colostrum management, your environment, your stocking density. All of these things can play into whether an animal is more likely to get these diseases or not. So vaccination, it's a great tool, but it's not a silver bullet. And you just want to be making sure that, your hygiene, coming into calving time, having a clean cow in the calving pen. Usually when the calf is looking for that first suck, it's going to reach a tail or a hock or something first. And if that cow is dirty, that can be an immediate source of infection to the calf. So keeping a clean cow in a clean calving pen and keeping that hygiene in the environment is super, super important as well. Cool. Thank you very much. That's me. I'll go back to chat again.
Thank you very much. I'm going to stop sharing there now, and we should all be coming up on the screen. So thanks very much for running through that. And just to mention, you were saying about the IBR testing through the vet as well, like anybody who was involved in the beef welfare from last year that did it, you can actually get your results through ICBF in the Animal Health Ireland portal. So at least they can look back on that and see what the status of the herd was when they were tested. You were just talking about the difference between your live and you were talking about the live and inactive vaccines. What is the difference between the two?
Yeah, so basically the difference is that one is a live form of the disease that has just been modified so that it can't actually cause disease in the animal, but it replicates as if it was kind of a natural disease and creates a strong immune response. The inactivated vaccine contains either killed disease within it or proteins or DNA from the bugs that we are trying to protect against. These ones kind of can take a little bit longer to work, which is often why inactivated vaccines will need 2 doses given, just to give that animal time and enough exposure to booster a strong enough immune response so that they're protected. But yeah, that's the main difference. One contains a live modified form of the disease to kind of have a quick and a strong immune response to it. The inactivated is a little bit slower, and it's just because it's a killed or modified version of the disease.
Thanks very much. And just Ed, on your farm, how many pre-calving vaccines are you giving to your cows?
So yeah, look, the Rotavic Corona, we're using that here with 19 years. In 2006, we got a bad outbreak when we were spring calving that time. It lost a couple of calves out of it from what I can remember. But yeah, went to do it from the year after that. We went on it and we didn't look back since. I think we got a small bit of rota right there now, and a bunch of dairy bred calves I brought in a couple of years ago, and it did spread kind of a subclinical bit of it to a few spring calvers, the last of them that we had, the last year that we had there. But generally speaking, it's not a thing we get with the autumn calvers, thank God. But I wouldn't give up the vaccine either. IBR live in, yeah. They'd get that in March and in September here. So a lot of the cows that have calved, by the time they get their second shot in the autumn, they get their first shot in the spring of the year as well. So we're on a every 6 months live vaccine as well. So
And just, it's interesting that you mentioned the dairy beef calves. So like when you're buying them in, I suppose it's the other end of the spectrum. How important is the herd's vaccination status to you when you're buying them calves?
Yeah, I suppose looking enough and dealing with the same few fellas the last number of years, they would be generally very good operators in terms of protocol for keeping scours down. They have, generally speaking, large herds, so they can't be dealing with scour in a big wave and hit. So definitely prevention is the key there as well to management. Yeah, I wouldn't buy from a herd unless they were vaccinating, and the likes of ideally rota. IBR is nearly taken for granted that everyone is doing it now. So yeah, just to cover themselves, to be fair, and it does help me as well. Yeah, definitely, like if they aren't vaccinated for rota, the stress of even coming here as well, or trailers or transport, whatever it may be, if we do get a bit of harsh cold weather, like it can affect them, and did get a bit of it there about 4 or 5 years ago, right? And they weren't vaccinated ones that came from a previous herd that I bought from. So yeah, I would take it as it's a box that has to be ticked before I'll buy calves really from the farmer.
Yeah, and back to your point, you're working full-time off farm as well, so you just don't have time to be dealing with it. We have a good few questions coming in here, so I might start to go through some of these. There's one question here, Emma, for you. Farmer using Rotavic, do they have to use crypto, and will the Rotavic help a little bit to prevent crypto on the farm?
So I suppose, do they have to use the Cryptium vaccine? No, not if they're not having issues with cryptosporidiosis. It's really targeted for people who want to protect the calves against that. And if it's not an issue on your farm, then it's not something I would immediately reach for. The bugs are different. So a direct effect of vaccination, no, the Rotavic probably won't have a big effect on crypto. But what I would say then is that often calves that get sick are more liable to pick up other diseases in the environment. So by protecting animals, let's say against rotavirus, E. coli, coronavirus, yes, they may be less susceptible to pick up the cryptosporidium. But two vaccines are separate. But if crypto is not a problem on your farm, stick to your Rotavic, and that's fine. You don't have to reach for the Cryptium immediately.
Perfect. And you probably answered this question while you were talking, but another question, could you introduce cryptosporidium into a herd by using the vaccine if you haven't had crypto before?
No, you can't. So talking about live and inactivated vaccines, the Bovillus cryptium is an inactivated vaccine. So there's no kind of live disease in it. There's no risk of introducing it by vaccination. No.
Perfect. That's fair enough. There's another question here. I'm going to direct this to you, David. If you need to supplement a bolus with a magnesium bucket or equivalent, is there really any benefit in using boluses?
Yeah, I suppose it's an age-old kind of debate, Aisling, as you I think alluded to yourself there. You know, we have a reasonable idea, we'll say, what the requirements are. I suppose the missing links then would say are really what are we supplying, would say, from the forage that we're feeding our cattle, and that's obviously the main part of a suckler cows, or exclusively what they're being fed, would say, in the vast majority of cases. So, you know, it's hard to kind of, you know, and we know, we'll say, for certain, particularly the trace elements of the micro minerals, you know, there are areas of the country, would say, where there's either significant deficiencies or there's, you know, high levels of, you know, essentially other minerals that block the uptake, would say, of the key minerals that we're interested in. So kind of, you know, that's the key thing, to try to establish that first. And then obviously then if we think that we have a problem, we'll say we need to talk to our vet, we'll say, and try to establish, we'll say, you know, what the status of the herd is, what the state, which is going to be a consequence of the forage they're fed, and ultimately, we'll say, the soil concentrations of both the minerals and the antagonists, as they call them. And I suppose it's very difficult then to kind of recommend, you know, how much should be fed. Like you mentioned already very clearly, that typically, you know, 600, 700 kilo suckler cows should be getting something in the region of about 120 grams up to 140 grams a day from about 6 weeks at least, would say, out from calving, you know, of a good, well-balanced mineral. You know, that should be sufficient for the vast majority of pastures out there. But we do know that really old quality, poor quality, you know, grass, would say, and ultimately silage can be very, you know, can be much poorer, would say, mineral content. So we need to be, I suppose, ideally, would say, conscious of what we're working with at the start.
The beginning. And Ed, just from your point of view, like, you're aware you had a mineral deficiency on your farm. How did you come to find that out?
Yeah, it happened in 2020, I think. Yeah, the year of the pandemic. Yeah, cows continually repeating, absolutely broke our hearts that year, and destroyed the calving interval as well. Rake, repeat, spread, put the kits, but just destroyed the calving spread, I should say, for the following year. Took a lot of tidy up to get it right now after it. Just continually repeating. Cows come in after 3 weeks, after 6 weeks, just realised that embryos weren't sticking. So got a mineral analysis, picked I'm an area manager at Dairy Gold as well, so I'm a nutritionist. Decided that the best protocol looked to look at it from a mineral point of view, with everything else kind of ticked off. So we took a forage analysis of it. So they were on, it would have been what, I think it was February now at this point, or late January, yeah. I'd done a scan, yes, I'd done a scan around maybe just between Christmas and New Year. Results very poor, and the previous few years were very, very good. And I had everything lined up. Cows had minerals, got boluses, got, you name it. Condition was quite good. All those boxes were ticked. So one last thing we looked at was the mineral analysis of it. So went away and took a forage analysis. So decided, got a silage that had been picked at, took a sample out of several bales they were taken out of, and sent the sample away. And came back low in calcium, low in copper, selenium, high in molybdenum, and sorry, selenium was quite low as well, and high molybdenum, so and aluminium. So we had a couple of antagonists there on top of already low levels of macrominerals. So that's what's caused their issue. So since the get-go, I'm feeding what happens to fit the spec quite well is a maize beet balance of mineral there with chelated, stroke protected pharma copper, selenium, iodine inside it. I feed the 200 grams of that. We'll say pre-breeding, after breeding, and I cut it back to probably at this stage of the game when they're gone on back and calf 50, 60 days, back to about 100, 120 grams. I generally feed that up to the time they're dry. I would cut it back. I'd always give a small bit of it, just to give a bit of cover. I'd be conscious enough that it may affect the calf, or the growing calf inside the cow. I might pull back to 50 or 60 grams there, maybe in March, maybe April. Might stop it for a few weeks, maybe 2 weeks before they go, before they're dried off, but generally need to continue that. And yeah, turn the scanning results around and everything else with it, thank God. Yeah.
Brilliant.
But you're looking at it on the hardware, unfortunately. You know?
Unfortunately, yeah. It'd be no fun if it was straightforward. And a question came in. Do you know what mineral was causing the repeats in your cows?
Specifically, yeah, selenium, getting calves or embryos to stick, basically.
Okay.
That countered with low copper as well wasn't helping the situation either. I suppose look, all minerals are actually as important as the other, but on top of it, having being in a high molybdenum area, which we kind of knew already, but happened to have high molybdenum as well there. Now I know we took a mineral analysis maybe a year or two ago, and it had happened to balance itself out slightly as well. I couldn't rightly say what it's down to. Maybe lime or something like that. Maybe no, right. No, lime would have been bad to begin with, but they seem to have leveled out. Right, the two tests were different when we took them maybe 2 or 3 years apart. All right, but yeah, you'd have to find out the hard way, unfortunately, with minerals that way.
Yeah, no, that's very true. And a question in here for you, Emma. A farmer that has had issues with coccidiosis in calves after going to grass in April or May for the past 2 years. Is there any recommended vaccination program for them?
So we don't actually have a vaccination for coccidiosis. There is a product, Vicoxan, that can be given now, just kind of it's on an individual basis really when you want to be giving it. You kind of want to be giving it either sort of 10 days, 2 weeks after turnout, or if you've had issues in the past, making sure that you're giving it kind of at least 10 days before your risk period in the past. And then one other thing I'll kind of, I suppose, say to that, sometimes it's just the way, and there might be just a lot of coccidiosis in the environment. It's very resilient, but often there can be other things at play. Like we said, it can be multifactorial. So just making sure that there is no, basically any animal that's had illness before it can be more susceptible to picking up coccidiosis if they are, if they struggled around weaning time, if there's a bit of pinch in grass cover or anything like that. So there can be other underlying factors to it as well. But long story short, no vaccination. There is a product we supply called Vicoxan that can be used kind of as a treatment and preventative. And just, yeah, speak to your vet about the timings for your individual case is the best way to do it.
Perfect. And another question for you, Emma, and not related to this topic directly. However, can you administer Tribovax 10 Clostridial vaccine subcutaneously in an area other than the loose neck in the skin as directed or prescribed?
Yeah, so that's on the label basically. So that's the way we ideally would like it to be given, and it's really just ease of administration. It's usually a clean area, and that you're not going to kind of introduce contamination, and it's not going to affect carcass quality maybe as much. So if you can go in the neck, that would be ideal. Look, and that's what the SPC says, preferably if it's an issue where it's unsafe to do so, or yeah, you're struggling, you can go over the skin of the ribs, just kind of behind the shoulder. That's another alternative, but that is off label. So preferably going in the skin of the neck is the best way to go.
Perfect. Thanks for that. David, just a question in terms of body condition scoring. Should a cow get meal in advance of calving to ensure sufficient milk, or is dry cow minerals and silage sufficient, assuming that the body condition is okay?
Yeah, I think absolutely if the body condition score is okay, Aisling, you know, there's no need, would say, for any supplementary concentrate or meal to be fed. You know, I suppose the key one is maybe if you had silage, would say, or indeed hay that was very low in protein. You know, it's important, would say, that you have a minimum amount of, I suppose, amino acids or protein in the diet, in the run-up, would say, to when that colostrum, you know, and you mentioned it earlier, would say, is being produced. So absolutely key, would say, for the viability of the calf, would say, and particularly its immune function, its health, would say, in the first weeks and months after birth. So I think it's really just the protein, not so much the energy, would say, level. And certain, but obviously, you know, that's based on the cow being in good condition. The other thing, as we mentioned, I think earlier there, you know, obviously you don't want to contribute, would say, to over fatness in the cow, or indeed, you know, greater growth in the calf, because the calf, you know, puts on a sizable amount of its overall growth in the last month. You know, it could be growing up to 1 kilogram a day in the last few weeks, would say, before it's born. But most of that is really comes from nutrients that the cow breaks down from her own fat reserves.
Brilliant. And you just mentioned about the low protein silage is there. If somebody is aware they've low protein silage or they're a bit worried about it, what could they do to try and improve that?
Yeah, as I say, you know, you could potentially use a higher, you know, even soybean meal on its own, would say, just to try to, I suppose, ensure that there's sufficient protein, would say, and good quality amino acids, would say, in the overall diet. And we do know, would say, and we see the same thing with sheep, that animals that have severely, I suppose, a deficiency, would say, in protein and amino acids in particular, that often, what happens is that they get, that alone have the lower content, would say, of colostrum, but even just the ability that potentially can lead to oedema, would say, or flagging, essentially, would say, in the udder, and it's harder, would say, to milk them, So, I suppose it's that balance really between not overfeeding them, but just making sure that they're getting sufficient protein in the diet.
Perfect. And one last question here on the body condition. Somebody has cows that are kind of fat. Can they just get away with just feeding them hay?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, we're often working in the dark in terms of quality. Like, you can get really good quality hay, we'll say, if it's, cut at an early stage, we'll say, development, or very poor quality material. And again, it just goes back, as I say, that balance to ensure that you have enough minerals, would say. The key minerals, is, Ed is alluded to there, would say very clearly, your selenium, your copper, your iodine, your zinc, would say, there in the run-up to calving, and at the same time, would say, not over-conditioning the cow.
Perfect. And just back to the minerals again, is there a need for multivitamin to be given to a newborn calf, or at what stage is it best to give one, if at all?
Yeah, I suppose the key one now, and for a lot of your listeners, would say, and particularly, for Ed there, would say, who I suppose operates, very highly muscled, high quality calves. The big one would be selenium, would say, in those muscled calves, so double muscled calves, essentially. That's, a deficiency in selenium can lead to what they call white muscle disease, and that that can lead to death, would say, in the calf. And it's probably the key one, in the calf that's born. So just watch for that, would say, if you are, I suppose, targeting, would say, the breeding of, highly muscled calves, because again, that muscle, has a huge demand, would say, for selenium.
Perfect. Thanks, David. Ed, just a question for you in terms of the cost of the vaccines that you're using. What are they roughly per head?
RotaVac Corona will cost about €10 a head. IBR somewhere in around the $5. What else am I missing? Rota, IBR.
And crypto?
The cows,
I know you're not using the crypto, but that's in around the
No, I haven't
€20.
had an issue with crypto at all, thank God, and hopefully it stays that way.
Yeah, the cryptium is roughly a similar price to the RotaVac Corona, so somewhere in and around 10 and €11 mark. Yeah, needs 2 doses given in the first year, whereas RotaVac is just always the 1 dose. So it is, yeah, looking around kind of the €20 or just north of it for the first year for the cryptium.
So it's back to the 10 or €11 then the second year, then when they've their first shot or their booster shot.
Yeah, and those people having problems, like you probably, depending on the size of the calf and the dosing protocol, if you're using a product like Halicure at the moment to prevent, that usually is anywhere kind of from €8 to kind of €14 per calf to do that, along with the labour and sometimes the danger of trying to get in and dose that calf every day for a week. So yeah, no, it's definitely a labour saver and a good investment for the cryptium if it's an issue for you.
Absolutely, and we're going to have Michael Biggins on the call for Thursday night, and he's been using the Halicure, but he's switched over to using the cryptium this year as well. So like that, hoping it'll save a lot of labour from that point of view. There's another question in here. I gave my Rota Corona under the skin. Is it useless now?
No, so Rota Corona is licensed to go under the skin. Yeah, it can go either in the muscle or under the skin. And the cryptium, that's the one just to make sure that goes under the skin, only licensed to be given under the skin. But the Rota Corona under the skin is fine. It'll be fine. And you can also give the RotaVac Corona in the muscle as well.
Great, thanks, Emma. David, just on the body condition scoring, somebody has done this and they can't seem to decide what score their cows are, and they're wondering, is there a course available or any, I suppose, guidance on how to know what score the animal's falling in at?
Yeah, look, it's a common, I suppose, issue. Absolutely, there are courses. It's extremely, as you very clearly outlined the process there, Aisling, at the very start. It's something like a lot of things. It's really just practice. And the key one is, it's not so much that you're absolutely, 100% scoring the animal all the time, but that you're consistent. So in other words, if you score an animal, would say on a normal scale of 0 to 5, with 3 being kind of intermediate, would say, or a target for most animals, that you're consistent, would say, and you're able to pick up, would say, those cows that have either lost condition, principally, would say, or indeed those maybe that might be slightly over conditioned. But would say, and our colleagues would say in the advisory service, are well versed in this and can provide, would say, that training, would say, for farmers.
Absolutely. And sometimes people overthink it a little as well. And it's not that you have to be 2.75 or 2.5, but by handling, a lot of them will know what, whether the cow is fat or.
Yeah, and again, it's as you outlined, it's the subcutaneous of the fat under the skin, because that's what's available to the cow to mobilize or to use, would say, when she needs, would say, additional energy, and it's not the size of the cow. So you can get a big, thin cow, or a small fat cow. So that's why the body condition score is so, I suppose, useful relative to just the body weight.
Absolutely. And even the fact of actually feeling them as well, because I know we were trying to get pictures in Great, and some of the cows are real hairy, and sure, without feeling them, you wouldn't have a clue until you actually put your hands on them.
And just one last thing on that one. Yeah. Some people, I suppose, get carried away, like, they might have very muscled cows, like Limousin Charolais type cows, and they look square and they look in good order, but yet they might have very little fat cover.
Yes.
So that's the key then, to be able to differentiate what's actually muscle versus, would say, as I say, fat under the skin.
Absolutely. They could come down and practice on Ed's cows. There's plenty of muscle in them. Perfect. Thanks, David. Back to you again, Emma. What's the best vaccine for grass tetanus at turnout? I lost a cow last year, a week after turnout, and they're on minerals pre and post turnout, I'm assuming.
Yeah, so well, we don't have vaccine for grass tetany, and that I maybe can throw back to David for kind of management of that with minerals. And what we can vaccinate for is clostridial disease. So if you just had a sudden death, that's something that we can look at vaccinating for. So Tribovax 10 is one of our products that's usually comprehensive clostridial protection. So usually what you'd see with those is sudden death and blown up that a blown up carcass. But in terms of grass tetany, if that was different, we don't provide a vaccination for it. But yeah, I don't know, David, if you want to make a comment on prevention.
Yeah, you're right, Emma. Like, it's really a nutritional issue, and obviously, particularly in the spring when you have rush growth, would say you have a high nitrogen content in the grass, would say high potassium, equally would say content in the grass. It typically would say, it comes with lower magnesium content and lower magnesium availability, more to the point, to the animal. And, good practice would normally be, would say that animals would need, I suppose, calcined, magnesite or calmag in the diet in the region of about 60 grams, would say, per head per day. Apologies if the light just went off. And about half that, would say, then is magnesium. So again, I suppose prophylactic, a bit like, the vaccinations, better to be safe than sorry.
Brilliant. Thanks, David. I'm going to pull Martina in at this stage, just in case there's any questions there I missed, because there's a lot coming in there through the chat.
Aisling, yeah. No, listen, there's you've gone through an awful lot of them. I suppose a lot of them are coming back to the powdered mineral. Some fellas have, maybe done the bolus and maybe had licks in, are worried about it now and are saying, well, I'm 3 weeks out, what do I do if I give them, do I give them more mineral? Like, say, instead of, if it says 100, give them 120. Will I poison them? Is there anything to watch out for?
I don't think the poisoning anyway, Martina would say, unless there was some issue with the manufacture of the minerals, would be a problem, And I guess you say, again, and Aisling alluded to it earlier, would say there in terms of the variation in the boluses, and in some case, and the size of the cow obviously as well, would say, in the number of boluses that the cow might need, and how long ago since she received her bolus, And we do know also that, unfortunately, it's the same going back to the magnesium boluses or the calmag boluses, that sometimes cattle can regurgitate them. They can bring them up again, and we won't know that. Sometimes they can lodge in the wrong part of the stomach. Yeah. So I suppose that's why, where it's possible, particularly in the cows indoors, where you can supplement, would say, with the dusting, would say, or indeed even the buckets. You probably have maybe a better chance overall of ensuring that they're actually consuming it. Now, the problem with the buckets is that they you know, and we see the same with sheep, that they probably overindulge in them as well.
Yeah.
You know,
And there's the odd greedy cow. But if you haven't started and you're 3 weeks out now and you've put in the bolus, we'll say whatever it was 4 weeks ago, like if you wanted now to add in the dusted mineral, can you give, like, say, instead of 100 grams, could you give 120, and will that do any harm? Is kind of a bit of a trade-off
it's highly
question.
highly unlikely that it would do any harm at all, Martina, because like there's quite a wide range of tolerance, you know, for most of those, particularly the trace, and it's mainly the trace elements we're talking about here, you know. So that wouldn't be an issue at all. And again, you know, if in doubt, better would say to have yourself covered.
Okay. And then for Emma, on the crypto vaccine, really brilliant to see it out there, you know, have had issues with it, but I'm 3 weeks out from calving. Can I give it now? I won't get the 2 shots.
Yeah, long story short, it's not going to do much for you. So probably not one to go for this year. You really do want to get those 2 doses in just to make sure that you've got
Maybe the
enough
later
protection.
calvers, I suppose, if you have anything over the 7 weeks.
Yeah, potentially. Now, the only thing about that is we do like kind of a whole herd policy, basically, because if you're vaccinating from the start, you're going to reduce the amount of bugs that are building up in the environment from the get-go. And that's usually what happens. It's kind of a build-up over time from the start, and you only get problems in the later ones. But by vaccinating the early ones as well as the later ones, you're just stopping that build up all the time. So yes, while you may get some protection by doing the later calvers, you kind of don't have any effect on all the bugs in the environment. So
you're not
yeah,
reducing that. And then just on the what was the one? Yeah, the vaccines then for the pneumonias. So there's 2 questions on that. How soon can I vaccinate? And one man said that he was told that he can only use an intranasal for his IBRs. Why is that? You said about injecting.
yes. So if the calf, you can give IBR marker live from 2 weeks old, and then between the ages of 2 weeks and 3 months of age, that calf can only be vaccinated up the nose intranasally. From 3 months of age, the calves can be vaccinated in the muscle. Basically, the reason is to do with the passage of the immunity in the beastons, like we were talking about earlier. So that's how the calf gets its immunity. It's born with no immune system otherwise, and it uses that immunity in the first weeks of its life. So if you go in with an injectable vaccine in that time, they just don't respond well because they're riding off the back of their mother's immunity and they're not generating their own. Whereas going up the nose will help with that. So up the nose between 2 weeks and 3 months old. From 3 months, you can go into the muscle or up the nose. And then vaccinating spring-born calves. So it depends what you're dealing with and when your problems are. So again, your local vet is often best placed to give you advice on this. But you can go in from the day of birth with intranasal vaccination, Bovilis intranasal. And then you can go in with Bovipast, which is an injectable pneumonia vaccine from approximately 2 weeks of age.
I might just ask Ed a question from that. Like, Ed, when you're calving outdoors, how do you make, you know, you're obviously giving the vaccines to the cows, you wanted to pass through to the calves, through the beastons. How do you make sure they get enough if they're calved out in the field?
Yeah, sure. Look, I suppose there's 2 different ways to do it. We have the cows. If I'm there or off the weekend or in the evening, and if a cow seems to progress away fine outside, I'll let her calve outside. I wouldn't interrupt her. Watch very tight. Just make sure they do get beastings into them. I wouldn't be happy until I'd see a calf standing sucking. I'd wait on. Look, if it's night time, we'd just wait on for half an hour and see does he get up and get going. Most of the time they do. If it's a cow that calves inside, I generally milk the cow and throw beastings back in the calf just to be sure he hasn't got. Generally speaking, if it's a jacking a calf, he's that bit slower anyway. So now look, there's some cases where the calves will get up readily enough after calving and you'll see him sucking. And it's convenient because I'll keep the cow in the locking barrier after calving, or in the calving gate rather. And I can put the calf sucking right under as well, so it's handy that way. But and look, if there's cows outside that won't let a calf suck, or if the calf hasn't got up and suck, we'll do our best to try and bring the cow and calf in as safely as we can. And also, there's times where that's not safe as well to do it either. So
they're earmarked for culling.
Generally, look, these things would be a fearsome part to try and get into them anyway. And look, again, working part-time or working full-time, And farming part-time, you generally don't want those headaches go out on the road in the morning. Yeah, if the calf sucked or not, you generally just put it back in him or put him in or put him sucking. You know.
I have just two, because we're bang on time now, 9 o'clock. So I've
Yeah.
just two quick fire ones for David. It's just how much soya would you feed to a cow and a heifer if you're low on protein? And then the protected mineral, do I need them, or why would I need them, I suppose, is the question, and are they expensive?
Yeah, I suppose on the soya one would say, soya is roughly about half, would say, of its content is protein, would say it's about 48% would say protein, and really high quality protein. So would say a kilogram would be giving you almost half a kilogram, would say, of protein, Martina. So again, it really depends, would say, what's the gap that you need to fill, and whether they're getting any other concentrate with that. Generally speaking, you'll be feeding maybe, would say, a bit of meal, and if you wanted to fortify, would say, increase the protein content, you could mix soy with it.
Okay. And then just the protected minerals.
Yeah, so the protected minerals, again, I suppose, most minerals, and Aisling showed, a label there, would say, and in the vast majority of cases, they're oxides or sulfates or whatever, would say, that they're, I suppose, the form that's mined out of the ground. They often I suppose in an effort, would say, to make them more available, would say, to the animal, they kind of link them or chelate them, in other words, would say, with an organic compound, such as, again, an amino acid or fat or whatever. And that allows them to pass into the cells of the animal, would say, a lot easier,
Okay.
That might allow also, would say, to reduce the amount of minerals. So again, so you might have lower mineral content, but you have better, I suppose, availability to the animal, But again, it really depends, would say, on what is the gap, how much I suppose, of a deficiency are you trying to make up, would say, there. And the availability to the animal should be better with the chelation, would say, or we'll call it the organic forms, as you mentioned.
And just the very last question from Fintan: can you adjust minerals onto bale silage, or would it be lost to it?
Yeah, again, we've often been discussing this. It's easier for it to stick, or here would say, to the, I suppose, a sharp chopped, more damper often, would say, pit silage. But certainly would say, again, it depends on the feeding regime, would say, if the animals are clearing the silage and the mineral will be on the ground, well then obviously they can lick it, would say. But if you're piling silage up in front of the barriers, well then it can easily move down through and get filtered down and maybe being lost to the animal after.
So maybe it goes back to Aisling's point: if you had that, maybe if you were feeding it twice a day, your cows will have more chance of each of them getting a bit of it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's me, Aisling.
Good. Super. So I just, as we're coming to the end of tonight's webinar, I'd like to say a sincere word of thanks to Ed, David and Emma, for coming on tonight and sharing their experiences and knowledge, and for answering all the questions. And another word of thanks to Martina, James and Margaret, who are in the background for our IT support. I'd like to thank everybody who joined us for coming on, and I hope that you found it useful. And thank you very much for all the questions that came in. They were all very, very interesting for everybody else to hear as well. And we hope that you'll join us Thursday evening for part 2 of our webinar series at 8 o'clock. So Thursday night, we're going to focus on calving the suckler cow and that post-calving management of both the cow and calf. So it'll cover when and how to intervene during a calving, and then strategies for managing the newborn calf, as well as tips to help get the cow back in calf. So it's going to be chaired by James Milan, who's our other FutureBeef advisor, and will feature Dr. Doreen Curtin from NCBC, Dr. John Donnellan, who's our vet in Teagasc Grange, and Michael Biggins, who's another FutureBeef farmer, and he's from Ballynalty in County Mayo. So the recording from tonight will be up on the Teagasc FutureBeef webpage. And again, thank you very much for joining us, and wishing you a good evening and a safe calving season.